Hello, my name is Matthew Randall and welcome to this first tutorial on match moving in Maya. I'm going to start off with After Effects just to show you how to prep the files. But first of all, before we do that, I just want to sort of talk about what we're planning to do with our match move. If we look at this camera shot that we've got here, what I want to be able to do is add virtual scenes virtual objects to this scene. Okay, and that's fairly easy to do when the camera is not moving. Okay, I can just sort of position something on that table to make it look like it's on that table, or something to make it look like it's on that wall. That's fine. But if we play this, obviously what you'll see is we're dealing with a moving shot, which is fairly common when we're dealing with visual effects. So I've got this pan here. I pan to the left over this drum kit, then I pan to the right, and then Sandeep comes in and puts this green box onto the table. Okay. So I'm dealing with a camera move here. So what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to create a virtual camera. In order to add objects or virtual objects to this scene, I'm going to need to create a virtual camera that replicates the position and movement of the real camera in this scene. So I need to get myself a good camera position first that matches the real scene. Then I need to start animating the camera to replicate how the camera moved in the to replicate in the virtual scene how the camera moved in the real scene. Okay. Before we do any of that in Maya, we need to obviously what we need to do is take this video and output it as a JPEG sequence, so that we can actually put it as an image plane in Maya. This will make more sense when we do it, but also I want to put it as a plane in Maya so that I can match things against it within Maya. In order to, and obviously it's not a single image, it's a sequence of images. Okay, so in order to do that, what I want to do, I've kind of created two compositions here. All I've done is I've imported the video footage here. Okay, all I've done is put the video footage into a comp. So it's just a blank comp with just this footage with it. I haven't done anything else with it in After Effects. Okay, indeed you could probably do this process within Premiere or another editing package if you prefer. I've just reached for After Effects because it's close to hand. The key thing to check for is that the frame rate is identical between the composition and the original video, which is 25 frames per second in this case, and the height and width is the same, which in this case is the full HD 1080p dimensions. Okay, once you've done that, you can then render out your comp. So just grab your composition here and just drag it to your render window. Okay. And to set it to JPEG, click on the output module bit here, okay, and then select JPEG, okay, JPEG sequence. Then you can set your quality. I've put it on 9. Click OK, and then this is probably the important part here. This is the file name that we're going to give our image sequence. So obviously there's multiple files coming out of this. So we've got a sort of template here, if you like. We've got the name that we're going to give it, then an underscore, then the actual number .jpeg. Now Maya doesn't like this format, so if we output it like this, we're going to have problems inside Maya. So to avoid it, what we want to do is change this underscore. So after the name and just before the number. Okay, we want to change this underscore to a dot. So all I've got to do is click on it, ignore this is a previous output that I've done, and then just change this underscore to a dot. These square brackets won't exist in the actual final names. That's just to aid as a visual aid to the template. Okay, those won't exist in the actual file names that are produced. So that's the key part there. Okay, I'm not going to output this now, but yeah. Make sure you put that dot in rather than the underscore. Okay. Now I'm going to go and show you what you should get. So inside, once you've done that, you should get a sequence of images. Let's have a look. I'm just going to find that image sequence. Hang on, it's not there. I've put it in my site, but Maya project. Okay. And here we are. So you should get a sequence of images, something like this, and you get just the name dot the frame number dot JPEG. Okay, that's perfect, and Maya won't have a problem with that. Okay, now what do we want to do? We want to do is go into Maya, and I've already set up a project in Maya for this work that we're going to do. So what you'll see here, and I advise you to do this. It makes it much easier because you're dealing with external files. It'll make it much easier to move your work from between university and your home computer, etc., etc. Okay, because as soon as the drive letter changes, where you've got your image sequence, then Maya will lose that, and you've got to remap it. Okay, so to avoid any of that, my advice is to create a Maya project. So what you'll see in here is I've created a Maya project for this tutorial here. Okay, and obviously my scenes. So if I go File, Save Scene. Because I've opened this project up, I've set the project to that folder. Okay, it's automatically going to be. Here we go. Save as here. It's automatically going to be looking at the VTuts Maya project or VP Tuts Maya project folder inside scenes. Okay, so it's automatically looking inside the project for the scenes. Okay, and then what I've done is I've actually put the image sequence inside the image sources folder. Okay, again, just put it in a folder there. Okay, and what you'll find is when I go to create my camera, I can just pick up that image sequence, and that should connect up nicely. Okay, right. Before we do anything before we start doing our match move, we want to actually set up our settings. So I'm going to go Window, Settings, Preferences. What I've done is I've actually measured some things inside the actual set. So I've measured the table, I've measured the floor, the size of the sofa. I measured things inside that scene that we shot. Okay, so that I can recreate cubes of the same dimension, and because I know those are the same dimension, that's going to really help me position things correctly. Okay, okay, so first thing I want to do is go into settings and make sure that my units are correct. So I'm working in meters. Okay, so I'm going to put in meters. Okay, angles, degrees, that's fine. And then my film rate, if you remember rightly, was 25 frames per second. So I'm going to go for PAL, 25 frames per second. So just make sure that those all kind of match up. Okay. The other thing that you might be worth looking at, but I don't think you'll have too much of a problem, but it is worth, because we're going to do some animation, rather than having Maya fly through the animation as quickly as possible, which will probably run quite slowly anyway, because we are working with the full resolution video here. There is an argument for outputting from After Effects a lower resolution proxy video, but that can create problems because we actually want to set the whole render. We actually want to render out at 1080p so that we can then comp it together in After Effects. So we want what we're actually rendering from Maya to be in full HD as well. So by having stuff smaller and bigger, there might be slight differences in the aspect ratio that could cause problems. And then the other thing we're trying to do is we're trying to really accurately line things up within Maya, and actually having that resolution will help us. So this is probably one of those occasions when actually reducing the resolution isn't a great idea. Maybe you want to just work from a faster hard drive, or perhaps just output lower quality JPEGs. That might be an option. Okay, something for you to explore there. But anyway, what we can do in here is we can tell Maya to play every frame. So it will play every frame as fast, so it won't skip any frame, which is what we want. Okay, if we go real time, what will happen is if it can't render quickly enough the animation, it will skip frames, and that's not going to help us really see how well we've matched the camera. Okay, so we want play every frame, and then we want to maximize the speed. So we don't want to, if we set 3, then Maya will try and play this back as quickly as possible. What we want to do is put this in real time, so that the fastest that Maya can play back the animation is at 25 frames per second. Okay, as I said, I don't think it'll be a huge problem, because I think you'll find that Maya won't actually be able to reach that speed anyway, but it's good to have those settings in there. Once we're happy with that, we're going to go to save. So we've just set up our measurements, and we've just set up our the measurement we're working with and the frame rate that we're working with. Okay. Now what I want to do is, in fact, I have just noticed that this is kind of seems to be a image plane on. No, that's fine. Okay, so now what you'll see is it's zoomed it right in because we've changed the units, and we can just zoom out now. Okay. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to set up our render settings. So we can use. I'm not too bothered which renderer you use, the software renderer or Mental Ray. I'm going to go for Mental Ray because that's what I like. Okay. The key bit that we're really interested in is the settings down here in terms of the height and width. We want to set this to full HD. Okay, so now the output of Maya is matching the image sequence that we're working with, which is matching the source video that we're working with, which is matching the destination format that we ultimately want to produce to. Okay, it's really important that these things match. We can deal with them mismatching, but that does create complications, especially if they're different aspect ratios, and that's something to be aware of. Okay, I'm not going to deal with that right now. I might give you some hints as things you can do, but really you want to kind of shoot stuff to match your destination format. I'm sure we've covered that before. Okay. Great. I will have to go back into these settings anyway in a little bit, but that's the main bit that I want to do. Okay, so let's close that. Okay. Now what we want to do is open up our resolution gate. So I want to go. In fact, let's not do that in here. What I want to do is I'm going to add a new camera now. So this is going to be, rather than working with the perspective camera and animating the perspective camera, which I could do, so this is the default sort of camera that I can move around in Maya, okay, what I want to do is create a different camera, okay, so I want to create a new camera. Okay, so I'm going to create cameras. I'm just going to create a normal camera. You can't. These are cameras like with aim points and up points and things like that. That's not going to be any use to us. We just need to do. We need a freeform camera that we can just rotate ourselves and work with. Okay, so we need the default camera. Okay. Now hopefully that's created a camera for us. Yes, May was doing this the other day. It was making it really, really small. I'm not really sure why it's doing that. Okay, but yeah, it's making our camera look incredibly small, but here it is. Okay, if you struggle to find the camera, my advice is you can see everything in the outliner, and that's what I tend to do, so you can just kind of pick the camera out with the outliner. Okay, so that's our camera, and if I want to look through that camera then, so here it is. If I want to look through the camera, so I go panels, perspective, camera 1. In fact, I'm going to rename this camera, so I'm going to call it well, I used the Panasonic AF101, so I'm going to call it AF101 just to match it. Okay, and I use a 25mm lens. That's the other thing as well. Okay, these are all key things that we need to be aware of when we're setting up our camera anyway. Okay, so I've renamed the camera. Okay, and if I go into panels, perspective, there it is. Okay, I click on that, and what you'll see is I'm actually now looking through that camera. Okay, so if I go into my multi sort of camera view and I look in the perspective view here, and I grab my camera and I just start sort of moving it around, okay, you can see that I can actually manipulate my camera and I can actually see things, etc, etc. So that's really useful for me to be able to work with. I can see my camera through here, move it around, and see what's happening actually through the camera through this view. So I can kind of move between the two. Okay. Right, now what I want to do is in the camera I want to set up a resolution gate. So I want to go into camera settings and I want to turn on resolution gates. Okay, what that's doing is that's showing me actually what's actually going to get rendered. Okay, because obviously this view doesn't actually match. It doesn't actually match the same aspect ratio, so some kind of cropping is going to occur. So this is actually going to show me exactly what is going to get rendered. This is what our 1080p frame will be made of. Okay, that's really important for us to be able to kind of work out what's going on. So that's my resolution gate. The next thing I want to do is set up my my camera. So I want the field of view of my camera to match the field of view of, so I want the field of view of my virtual camera to match the field of view of my real camera. Okay? So in order to do this, I want to select the camera that I'm looking through. So this AF101, I want to select it and see it in the channel box. The quick way of doing that, if you're looking through the camera, is to go View, Select Camera. Okay, obviously I've got to be looking through the camera in order for that to work. Okay, and then I want to go into the attributes. Sorry, channel editor. Actually, should I stick with the attribute? I can stick with the attribute editor. Yeah. Okay, and if I click on Shape, I'm just going to try and move this down. Here we go. Great. Okay. If I click on Shape, I can actually change the field of view of the camera. Just making sure. Yeah, it's called angle of view here. Okay. The field of view is made up of a number of things. Okay, so it's made up of. It's difficult to see it all in one view on this screen here, but it's made up of, the angle of view is made up of the focal length of the lens, okay, and the camera aperture. Okay, the camera aperture is the size of the sensor. Okay, and I'm hoping you're already kind of aware of this, but the larger the size of the sensor, the wider the field of view you'll get. The smaller the sensor, the narrower the field of view you'll get for the same focal length. Okay, just to see that play out, if I change this field, if I change this sensor, let's just change this to say 0.5 by 0.2. Okay, see how that by making that smaller, that's made my field of view smaller, and so it's made the field of view tighter. So effectively, it's like it's acting like a zoom, if you like. That's probably not a really good analogy. And then the bigger the sensor, the wider the field of view. Okay, so if I put this sensor up to say 2, and I think this is in inches, this camera aperture here. Okay, and I put this to 1.5, let's say. Okay, then there you are. You can see that it's made the field of view larger. Okay. Great. There are default film gates that you can kind of pick and use. Okay, I'm going to leave those. Okay, what I'm going to do is I know that the focal length of the lens that I used was 25mm, and then I'm going to set the camera aperture to match the image sensor size, so the size of the image sensor on my camera. You can look this up in the manual. If it's a decent camera, it should have it in there. Obviously, cheaper cameras, sometimes they give you the image sensor as like 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch. That's not good enough. It really needs to be absolutely accurate. Okay, so if they're only giving that information, that's probably not going to be good enough to do what you want. I happen to know that the Panasonic AF101 camera has an image sensor of 0.701 by 0.394. Okay, so now, and then what we should have, just to sort of confirm that, is give me a film aspect ratio. And if I divide 16 by 9, I'll get 1.777 recurring, which is near enough 1.78. Okay, so that aspect ratio is matching. That's what I want to see. I want to see the camera aperture, the sensor ratio matching the camera aperture. Sorry, I've got this right. Yeah, I want it to match the. I want the aspect ratio of the camera aperture, which is here, to match the aspect ratio of the actual video or image sequence that I'm working with. Okay. Some cameras do this kind of weird, they do this sort of squashed pixel thing. They do like a pixel aspect ratio where a pixel isn't strictly speaking square. You want to try and avoid that because that obviously is going to add some more complications. Here it's in HD. HD is a square pixel, so that makes our life a lot easier. Okay, so that's our camera setup with the field of view. Okay. And now we've got our resolution gate in there. Now what I want to do is set up the. I actually want to set up the image plane. Okay, so I want to put this image sequence in the background or in front of this camera. Okay, so I'm going to go environment, image plane. So I'm still on the camera shape here. Just going to go into the environment tab here. Okay, if it's not open, just click on that environment tab and then click create. Okay, and now it's moved me into the image plane shape. Okay, and it's asking me in here, I can select a file, okay, and tell it where the image plane is. So okay, so I can just then select the first image. And notice how it went straight to the source images. Because I've set this up as a project, I've put the image sequence in the correct place, it's going to find everything much quicker for us. Okay, so I'm going to select that, go open, and I'm going to go use image sequence. I'm going to tell it that it's an image sequence. That's fine. If I wanted to, you know, I might not want to do the whole image, or I've had instances in the past where I'm trying to match a very accurate time match between the real sequence and the virtual sequence. So what you can do is you can offset the frame. So you can say, well, I want frame, you know, so that frame 1 in your Maya animation is actually, say, frame 20 or 40 or 45, whatever, in the image sequence. So you can offset it so that if you want to discard some frames at the start, you can do that. Obviously, you're probably going to do that, perhaps do that process within After Effects, but you can also do it. You can also just ignore them in Maya if you need to as well. Okay. The other thing I can do is actually set the length of my animation. This animation, because at the moment it's only 48 frames, I could set it to match the length of the animation in Maya. So I can just go into my file here. Let's have a look at how many images we've got in here. So it actually goes up to 431, but because it starts, and let's just check where it starts. Yeah, because it starts on 0000, that's something to be aware of. Then obviously, actually, that means that there's 432 frames in the entire animation. If you imagine that we had a single frame animation, that would only have a frame numbered 0000, but actually it would have one frame. So the number is greater by 1. Hope that makes sense. So we actually want to add 1 to this final frame. Okay, so it's 0043. So it's 432. Okay, so we can set this to 432. Okay, and then we can just, let's have a look, set this. Here we go. Oh, I've got a weird setting here. Just sometimes when you change the frame rate, Maya has a habit of sort of doing weird bits like this, but we can easily correct it. Just put 1 in there. So there we are, and I can actually see. And if I play this now, it's playing very, very slowly. Okay, so you will find that, again, as I predicted, the HD access speed isn't going to be as fast as you may think. Okay. So it's actually got the image sequence inside it now, and it's playing it in front of the camera. And what's happening is this image plane is actually locked in front of the camera. If I view this through the perspective camera, you can see actually we've got the image plane locked to the camera. And as I move this camera around, the image plane moves with it. So it's locked in front of it. Okay. Now, because of kind of positioning stuff on this plane, we're actually going to probably be using quite a bit of this sort of space here. And so you're going to end up with stuff behind the image plane, which isn't really of much use to us. So what we actually want to do is move this image plane back plenty of distance. So whatever you're working with in your set, clearly you want to make the image plane further away than that. So in this case, where I would have had the back wall of that set, whatever the distance of the back wall was from that camera, I want to set it further than that. It doesn't need to be accurate, but I need to make it easily further than that. So for example, in this case, if I go onto my image plane, so just by clicking on the image plane, what I can do is go and do I'm actually wondering whether it's on this. It might not be on this attribute. It might actually be on the camera. So if I go into my, I'm going to just open up my outliner, select my AF101. I've got the shape there. I think. And another thing to watch is the near plane clipping as well. If you've got stuff, I think we're going to be all right. But if you were working with stuff that was a real long way away from the camera, then you would have. Then you need to be aware of the clipping as well. Let's have a look. I'm trying to remember what the actual setting was. Not depth of field. Do apologise for this. I think I'm going to go back into image plane. Okay. It should be the depth setting. Okay. I think that's right, if I've got that correct. Okay. So notice how I can move the image plane away from the camera. Okay, and increase this. Hang on, that's not quite what I was after. So I'm actually moving the camera there. Okay, ignore what I just did there. So I can set the depth setting to say 10, and notice how it's moved it further away and made it a lot larger. Okay, I'm probably going to go for something like 15. Okay, again, this doesn't affect how this image plane appears in the camera. Okay, but it just means that if I put stuff in this area here, it won't actually be behind the image plane. I want it in front of the image plane. Okay, right. The next thing I want to do is quite often what I want to do is be able to zoom in on the image, so that on this image here, so when I'm actually doing my modeling in here and I want to get my models to match very closely with what's going on inside the video, I want to be able to zoom in. Now if I just go and zoom in, dolly in and dolly out the normal way, so that's it. So I'm dollying in and dollying out. What's actually happening is, if I go into the 2 view here, you can see what's actually happening. In fact, you can't see the camera very well. Okay. What's actually happening is I'm moving the camera, okay, through my scene. But obviously the image plane is fixed. So all I'm actually doing is, if I do this when I've started very precisely match moving my camera and positioning it, all I'm going to do is just mess up the scene. That's basically what I want to point out. Okay, I don't want to mess up the scene. Okay, so you don't really want to. So what you want to do is you actually want to, rather than moving the camera in, what you actually want to do is do what they call an overscan. What that means is just rather than moving the camera, you just want to zoom in on a bit that's inside the camera's field of view. Okay, so you're actually just expanding. You're just expanding this view and zooming in on it, but without actually moving the camera, and that's called overscan. Okay, it's a bit of an odd setting to access, so I want to show you how to. Sorry. I want to show you how to access that. Okay, so go to View, select Camera, and you want to go into the channel box here. Okay, and and then what you should be able to do is, in previous versions, you should be able to just select this. In fact, that's not the case with this. So in fact, what you want to do is, I found the easiest way to do it is with this selected in the channel view. So once you've got this selected in the channel view, if you go to Windows Hypergraph Hierarchy, what this does is Hypergraph Hierarchy just shows you all the nodes of the various sort of elements that make up your scene. So for example, cameras and lights, etc, etc. I don't want to get into details of it, but here's the camera, and what I want to do is look at all the things that are inputting into this camera shape, which will be the image plane and the actual camera shape as well. So I'll go Graph, Input Connections, and then I can see that all that sort of come together here. Okay, what I want to do is I want to select the camera shape, and by selecting that, because I can't actually select that here, okay, that's the problem I'm trying to get around here. So to select it, if I click on it, I can actually select that camera shape now. So whereas before I had the whole camera selected. I actually want to select the camera shape. So now, once I've got that camera shape selected, there's actually hidden attributes that you can't see in the channel editor that I might want to be able to access. Okay, so I'm going to go into here and go. I want to go edit and channel control. Okay. And then what you'll see is these loads of extra settings here. And what we want to do is we want to set the overscan property. So this one. So I want to add this and go and sort of basically move this. If I go to, if I move it in this direction, it's a keyable. In fact, I don't want it to be keyable because I'm not going to animate it. Non-keyable displayed. So it means that I can then manipulate that. Okay. I can go, and then the overscan is the bit that tells me how much to zoom in on the image I'm getting in my camera. Okay, that's without moving the camera itself, just zooming in on the image it's providing. And the let's have a look. And I want to be able to move, once I'm zoomed in, I want to be able to pan around that. So I want my vertical pan and my horizontal pan. Okay, if I close that, it's added all of those to here. And now if I edit that, what I should be able to do is I can just edit that and go, say, 0.7. Okay, and notice how it's zoomed in there. Okay, and then I can actually move around, go point. I'm trying to remember what the setting was now. If I go like 1, probably need to go more than that, say 400. Okay. If I select that, hang on. I've put the wrong settings in there. Let's just go and do that again. Channel. I know what I've done. So edit. It's an opportunity to show how to do it again, isn't it? Let's move those back. What I wanted to do was, I think it was film offset and vertical film offset. Okay, let's close that. Let's see what happens now. So if I select that, great, that's perfect. Okay, so a good way of manipulating some of these channels is if you select a channel and then just middle click and go from side to side. Can you see how I'm manipulating that channel? And see how I'm zooming in on the image plane here without moving the camera. Okay, so if I go into perspective and find our camera, here it is. Okay, and I can zoom in and it's not moving the camera at all. Okay, all I'm doing is just doing an overscan. So I'm actually I'm just making this. I'm making what the camera sees render larger than my field of view. Okay, and then what I can do is sort of pan through that, up and down through that. Okay, so that allows you to kind of zoom in and out as you need to. Okay, I'm just going to zoom this out now. Here we go. Okay, great. I'm trying to think what we need to do now. Okay, so another useful thing to do as well is, because you're moving this camera around, you're going to be moving this camera around to match what's happening in the scene, and it's very easy to just sort of, very easy just to, when you're looking at the camera, just to literally dolly in and out like I'm doing now. You just got to hit the wheel, even if you didn't intentionally manage to do it. Or if you're using the middle mouse button to kind of move these values up and down, on some of the cheaper mouses, this is one of the things I've noticed. You hit the middle mouse button, you actually end up moving the wheel slightly, so you end up hitting the middle mouse button and dollying in and out the camera. Now, if you just spent a while setting the camera up very carefully to match the position of the camera in your scene, that's going to be really annoying. So, and one of the things, by default in Maya, any movement, any changes you make to the camera position are not undoable. Okay, But you can switch that on. So this is a really useful thing to do, is to go view in your camera tools. Actually, hang on, camera. Yeah, in your camera settings, switch on undoable movement. Okay, and then hopefully, let's just do it in the perspective view. I might need to actually switch on the undo. Notice that each camera is different, so I'm going to have to switch on for this perspective view as well. But notice how if I move the camera now, okay, and if I go Control Z, it'll move back. So it'll move the camera back. So if I accidentally move my camera, I can hit Control Z and move back. So that's a really useful thing to do. Okay, so that's quite a lot of work, but we are now ready to start doing our match move, which I will do in the next tutorial.